In the last video, I said that I would make a short video about futurism. And so, I didn't actually know whether I would end up doing it or not. But hey, guess what? I've been walking around Pisa all day. And I've been thinking a lot about futurism. And I decided, why not? You know, but hold on a minute, I'm trying to find some. There's only 18 minutes left in my battery. Will I be able to make something productive out of it? Well, I just came back, and so I've been writing a lot about futurism today, and I was trying to come up with a comprehensive overview of futurism. Some people might not even know what the heck futurism is, but hey, I decided that I would sit down and I would come up with some sort of an overview about futurism. So here you go. I went out and bought a copy of it, and I just kind of wrote a few pages that I'm gonna try and allow people to understand what this art movement is. There's nobody there. And so I've been drinking Campari and trying to come up with a comprehensive thing, and this is what I came up with, using as a reference kind of different sources, but also just what I know about it. Here we go. If anyone thinks that I've fucked up somehow, or disagrees, or whatever, wants to make a comment about it, go ahead and do it. I have notes in front of me. I didn't learn this off by heart, but because I'm trying to structure it, and I'm going to try and do it in a compact time length. So here we go. Futurism. Well, what is futurism? Futurism is an artistic movement that emerged from Italy in the first decades of the 1900s. And what it is, it entailed all arts. It involved all of the arts, from poetry to sculpture to painting, but also it sought to promote new philosophy for all aspects of life, including travel, food, consumption, fashion, and so on. So as its title suggests, what it really aimed to do was to cut its ties with the past in a drastic and even violent way. And the first Futurist manifesto was written by a poet called Filippo Marinetti, very controversial figure, Filippo Tommaso Marinetti. And it was published on the 20th of February 1909 on the French newspaper Le Figaro. Why was it published in a French newspaper if it was an Italian artistic movement? Well, I don't really know. Maybe some of you have an answer looking at this video. Let's let me know. I never really came up with a precise answer, but whatever. This initial manifesto that kind of outlined the beginnings of the objectives of futurism was followed by many different manifestos that were more specific and focused on things like painting, literature, architecture, and so on for the next several years. So one of the main points of futurism was its exaltation and celebration of the modernity. And this, at the time, was best represented by cars, by machines, by electricity and planes, as well as other innovations that defined the first years of the 1900s. As mentioned, futurism aimed to cut its ties with the past via drastic and violent means. Thus, it didn't just celebrate the machines, but it also celebrated violent actions, militarism and war, it actually saw as a cleansing action, which prompted constant renovations. Needless to say that this is the most controversial aspect of futurism, and it would get more controversial as years went on. So, the predilection of depiction of cars, industries, and the masses also shows a marked representation of rapid evolution, or revolution, rapid evolution, revolution. And to represent this frantic and relentless idea of dynamism and movement, which represents rapid evolution, which was happening at the time, futurism tends to deform images, as if, just to give you an idea, the moment you notice something, you're looking at over there, and then you notice something over there, and as soon as you look at it, it moves away. That's the kind of idea that you get looking at a lot of different futurist paintings, is that they're moving. you can't catch them basically. The moment that you watch them, they're already gone. So basically it's as if they were moving away just as the spectator was looking at them. And the idea is that change is movement. So that's what that movement represents. It represents change. And movement represents future in motion. So the present is already the future. It's not the past, it's the future. So art usually would tend to romanticize on the idea of the present becoming future. Very often art is nostalgic. But in Futurism, it doesn't allow that. It always, you know, says the present is actually the future. Right. So basically, you know, just to give you another idea, stillness represents the past in the futurist mindset, for the same idea that I said, because it would mean it would be something nostalgic. You're immortalizing something in the present that is the past, but Futurism doesn't allow that. It immortalizes the present as if it was fleeting, so it's always the future. Alright, so Umberto Boccioni is the main exponent of Futurism, the figurative arts. You will see a work of his very famous on the back of the 20 cents, Italian coined 20-cent euros. And other renowned names are Giacomo Balla, Gino Severini, Fortunato De Pero, and Carlo Carrà, and so on. But Boccioni died during the First World War. I wish I would have double checked this, but I think that he fell off a horse during the First World War, fighting in the First World War. And actually Boccioni's death marks a sort of a transition between the first period of Futurism and the second period of Futurism. There's many different things that for which that separation between the first generation Futurists and the second generation Futurists exists. The Futurism, for example, geographically was actually developed around Milan, but the second generation Futurists tended to develop more around Rome. Another thing that really differentiates the second generation of Futurists is that they started to pay attention to art forms that they kind of ignored in the first generation, kind of snubbed in a way, because they were closer to capitalism in a sense too. So it was, they started to work within typography or advertising. And by the way, speaking of advertising, Campari, which I always talk about, and they should sponsor me because I'm a big fan of Campari, also because of its historical connotations and its links to Futurism. If you look at the bottle of Campari, it's kind of a cone-shaped bottle, right? And the idea was that it was actually a glass turned upside down. So if you turn it upside down, it would have been kind of like a normal glass. Usually glass is kind of, you know, are almost the same shape, but they tend to get smaller at the base. Campari actually is turned upside down, so the smaller part is at the top, and it's kind of a cone-shaped bottle. If you know Campari, you'll know what I'm talking about. But also, the advertising for Campari is pretty amazing in itself. There's really a great one where it depicts this man with an umbrella, but the umbrella is kind of turned upside down so that it gathers the rain, and he's drinking from the handle. So wow, there's a meme. But and the tagline is, "Oh, if only it could rain Campari." So it's beautiful, and it's very funny. Obviously, the second generation Futurism is actually one of the things that it's most renowned for, is because of its ties with fascism. So, as I said, the stuff about the violence and war and stuff really linked it to fascism, because fascism was all about that. But one should never forget that all art at the time had to be fascist, because if it didn't, it would be censored, and also the artists could even their careers would be destroyed, and in the worst cases they could have been killed. So when you're looking at the art from Italy from the time, you should be mindful of that they kind of had to be sympathetic at least towards the fascist ideals. It's kind of like what was happening in the Soviet Union with socialist realism, and by the same degree, you know, socialist realism wasn't just crappy art, it you know, birthed great works of art. So that's a thing to consider when you're looking at the art from the time. You should be aware of that. Obviously, if you opposed fascism and you were an artist, well, bad news. Anyway, so where am I? Futurism is often difficult for newcomers. Yeah, okay, so Futurism, people don't know what the heck Futurism is when they're newcomers to art movements. They kind of tend to struggle to differentiate it between other art movements like Expressionism and Cubism. Well, to me, actually, it's a blend of the two. And that's its beauty, really. It's because it blends Expressionism and Cubism. In fact, what most distinguishes it to me is the perspectives. So when you're looking at a painting, you only really get one viewpoint in most art movements. And that's, you know, the viewpoint of the spectator and the painting. But in Futurism, you can look at different parts of the painting and it's just as valid a viewpoint to start looking at it and therefore to start deciphering it. Well, you know, that's really interesting because when you think about it, it places this kind of ideal, places the spectator at the center of an evaluation of an artwork, which is really opposed to fascist ideals or any totalitarian ideals. Obviously, you don't want the spectator to think for themselves. You want spectators to look at a work of art, and the work of art communicates exactly what you should be receiving from it, what you're reading about it. But Futurism actually says, whatever you think of this work of art is your idea and it's fine. So basically, actually, I don't really see this as a particularly daring fight back against fascism. I actually see it as a fight back or just a knock towards the intellectual classes of people who, up to years before the Futurism was even a thing, thought themselves as bearer of codes by which what they said was right. So if they were looking at a painting and they said something about it, that was what it was. A spectator would be inclined to think that whatever that person said about that work of art was right, and what they might have initially thought about that work of art was wrong. Obviously, this dynamic is very common. We see it nowadays, you know. We struggle to come up with our own opinions about works of art because we are afraid to be wrong or right. And I've talked about this in the past. I actually made a video about this, is that art actually should encourage a subjective response from the spectator. And there's no being right or wrong, provided that, you know, your reasons for not liking a work of art are valid and you can back them up, and it's not just, you know, knocking something because, for example, it's difficult. Well, maybe that's the whole idea of it, is that it's challenging you, and therefore being challenged isn't a very pleasant experience. So being difficult is part of his job in a sense. So you understand that that's kind of the beauty of Futurism as well, is that it says you as a spectator can be right about this, and listen, I'm offering you different places where to start. What can I show you? Hold on a minute. Alright, so for example, I knew this was going to be longer than 18 minutes, please. This painting places the spectator right, it looks above the main subject, who is a parachutist. And this painting is actually called Before the Parachute Opens. Who's it by, actually? I can't remember his name. His name escapes me. Maybe I'll do another video where I show you. So, and what you can see here is whatever he is looking at, but from above the actual person. And it's really a simplistic viewpoint, and it's a very innovative viewpoint, because remember, airplanes were just invented back then. They had just been developed, and Futurism was so fascinated with them. So it places the viewer above the subject. This is a very simple example, but another one is that this is pessimism versus optimism. This is by Bala, actually. Wait, which way is it? What's the right way? Yeah, this is the right way. This is pessimism, this is optimism. And really, you can look at any spot in the painting and focus on that one, and you can come up with your own reading for the painting. I should move on. My last point about Futurism, and hopefully you already have an idea of what Futurism is all about, is that that this actually also impacted words. And in fact, in a sense, literature definitely did have an important role in the widespreading of futurism. And one of the most famous concepts regarding literature was Marinetti's idea of promoting the literary concept of parole in libertà, which is basically, you could translate it as free words, which itself is a concept that reminds me of free jazz. Basically, what it is was that this idea was defined by onomatopoeic words, often invented, and it was also defined by the use of sounds of machinery, like bang, brr, chuck, 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 whatever sound you can think of that you see perhaps in a comic book. Futurism was one of the first legitimate artistic movements to encourage the use of sounds within words, within pieces of literature. And that was really not done before then, at least not that much, at least not that I know of. And this has become one of the most famous points of futurism, is this use of machine sounds or weird words, made-up words, that anyone can make up because there's no rules in that sense. Because intellectualism and freedom of expression is... Hey, it's obviously a controversial art form, and there would be lots of other things that we could discuss regarding futurism, but I tried to give as neutral an overview as possible, and hopefully I succeeded. It's not easy because it's just not easy, but I'm trying, I'm trying. If you want to give me any feedback, I would really love that. I think I'm going to be making more videos about futurism because I just find it so inspiring. And also, I bought a really interesting book today about eroticism and futurism. Sex was just such an important thing in futurism, but sex was seen in such an odd way, in such an interesting way. And I'm really looking forward to reading it. I can't find the book, so I can't show you it. But believe me, maybe I can. Yeah, there it is. And what I'm really looking forward to seeing is the liberation of women, because as far as I see, the role of female within futurism was very strong and controversial, but it was all about the liberation of women, and the way in which it was described was so controversial at the time that it was, because it opposed feminism because it saw it as another way of trapping women. I gotta go because the battery's running out. Maybe we can talk about this some other time, but in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video. And Merry Christmas.